My next guest is a father of two girls who has been making headlines recently for the brave way he is taking a stand against dangerous gender ideology. It was the practice of medical gender transitions for children that first raised alarm bells for Chris Elston and led him to become known as Billboard Chris. The response of the left to Chris has been not just ugly, but seriously dangerous. Just have a look at this.
You! 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 Hey! You! 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 Hey! Get your ass up there!
Okay.
And that disturbing reaction hasn't just come from trans activists and the radical left. Here's how one police officer responded to the violence Chris suffered.
Excuse me, did you just say he came here to incite violence by forcing his opinion on people?
Yeah. Yes.
You think he came here to incite violence because they got offended by his sign?
When you
What
talk
is
to
wrong
someone
with you?
and scream at someone and
He
put
didn't
your
scream
face...
at all.
Yes,
he
he
didn't.
did.
They put their face in his face. What is wrong with you?
Billboard Chris joins me now. Chris, that was just a terrible ordeal. You must have been scared there because you were surrounded. They were so hostile. They became violent. It happened in full view of the police, who then didn't make any arrests. Has there been any arrests since then?
No, there haven't been any arrests at all. So it's been a week and a half. I'm not sure I expect any at this point because they have every single interaction on video. I was actually assaulted twice that day. And that's why the police had first arrived, because within seconds of arriving at this event, I saw a friend of mine. I wasn't even able to get over to him. I'd been there for about 5 seconds. I was assaulted. My nose was bleeding. So I called for the police. And then that officer arrived. She's the investigating officer. And she proceeded to say that maybe I cut myself to make it look like I got assaulted. She said I was screaming at people, that I instigated it, and that it was a mutual fight. And I have every single second of my time there. It was about 40 minutes in total. Every single second is recorded. It's all on Twitter at Billboard Chris. Everyone can watch this for themselves. It's just a complete and utter lie. So you said maybe I was scared. You know what? I'm used to this. I've had about 25 assaults doing what I do, traveling around North America, having conversations about what I consider to be the biggest child abuse scandal in modern medicine history. And I'm used to the police not doing anything about these assaults either.
Oh, this is incredible that a man who's made himself a human sandwich board, you basically have the sandwich board there, you've protest in the most peaceful manner possible, and you get this unhinged, demented response. Why do you think that is? Why do you think you showing up with a sandwich board saying that medically transitioning children is wrong gets such a hostile response?
Yeah, my main message, the sign I wear on my front usually says children cannot consent to puberty blockers. This is a factual statement. I don't even consider myself a protester, really. I'm out there to have conversations, and the signs are mean to stimulate conversations. But if you have any conversation about this at all, it drives the left crazy. The one thing they can't handle is a conversation, because as soon as you talk about this entire ideology falls to pieces. So all they ever try to do is stop conversation through shouting, blowing whistles. I've had university students come out of their dorm rooms and hold up blankets around me so that people can't see me. And increasingly, we see the left using violence to silence, because that's all they can do. They can't have a conversation about this. And when we're sterilizing kids, mutilating kids, and turning them into anorgasmic, lifelong pharmaceutical patients, I think it's reasonable for us to expect to be able to have conversations about this.
Well, I've interviewed one of these kids. I've interviewed several of them, but one that comes to mind is Chloe Cole, who's detransitioned now. But what happened to her, to my mind, is criminal. She was allowed to have these surgeries, irreversible surgeries, at the age of 13. She had a double mastectomy at 13. She's only 18 now, has all sorts of medical issues, long-term medical issues, and she fears she'll never have children. If she does have children, she certainly won't be able to breastfeed them. And you wonder, how can a 13-year-old consent to something so drastic, so lifelong and completely irreversible.
Yeah, they can't, obviously. They put her on puberty blockers at the age of 12. They started giving her testosterone at the age of 13. And then, yes, she had a mastectomy. And when she went for her pre-surgical appointment, there were about 10 or 11 other kids in the room, some of whom were younger than her. And we know from this same Kaiser Permanente in Oakland, California, that they've cut off the breasts of girls as young as 12 years old. And they've done what are called penile inversion surgeries on 16-year-old boys. So this is happening to thousands of kids across the United States. It's happening all over the world. And we need to be able to have conversations. We have Sweden, England, Finland, Norway, and the state of Florida have all put a stop to this practice through their medical boards because they conducted a systematic review of the evidence and found there was none. But for some reason, in my country, Canada, in the United States, in your country, Australia, none of these medical boards will simply look at the evidence. They're ideologically captured, and they're treating these kids who have all sorts of mental health comorbidities. There might have been trauma or abuse or sexual abuse. Half these kids have autism. They're cutting, they have eating disorders. There's always something, but they treat gender as though it's the underlying cause of all of their struggles. And right away on their first appointments, they start medicalizing children. It's insane.
Now, on Chloe Cole, I said she had the double mastectomy, I think, at 13. That she had it at 15. She started on the path to transition at 13. Let's just hear from her and hear from her in her own words what she has experienced.
I've had side effects from the puberty blockers, the cross-sex hormones, as well as the double mastectomy. I don't know whether I'll be able to conceive or if I'll be able to carry safely even. And even from the surgery, I've had some pretty bad side effects. Like I'll never be able to breastfeed, and I was informed of this, but I was allowed to make this decision when I didn't really understand just what that meant. I mean, I was 15 years old. I was just a kid. I've had some issues with my skin. I've had to wear bandages, and it's been well over 2 years since my surgery, and I'm still having complications.
Chloe and others have talked about the side effects of puberty blockers. Now, we are told that these drugs are just a pause. They're essentially harmless. Is that been your experience in investigating this area?
Right, so that's just a sales pitch is all that is. The theory goes that they allow a child to explore their gender identity. And then if they decide they don't want to transition, well, they won't have grown to look more like their sex, because apparently it would be traumatic to have your own physical development occur. But in practice, what happens, these kids are signing up for the puberty blockers, and then 98% of the time, they go on to the next step, which is the cross-sex hormones. Testosterone given to girls causes vaginal and uterine atrophy. These girls have to get hysterectomies after 4 or 5 years. They're sending teenage girls into menopause, which has 100 side effects of its own, including early onset dementia, early onset osteoporosis. These drugs cause bone demineralization, and the FDA even issued a warning about 6 months ago that these drugs are causing brain swelling and permanent vision loss. And they've never been approved for this purpose. So this whole thing is an experiment on kids, and there is no time machine where they get to go back in time from being 17 years old to 10 again, where they can go through puberty. Those years of development are lost. So that's just a lie, that these things are reversible.
Well, what's your message to parents, to carers, grandparents who are dealing with this in their family, who have got a child who has gender confusion and they're being encouraged to follow this path? This is called gender affirming care, after all.
Yeah, of course, the left uses euphemisms for everything. It's not gender affirming care. It's a childhood sex change, and it's leading to children who are now anorgasmic, sterilized, lifelong pharmaceutical patients. Now, what do we do with these kids? Well, how about we treat them for the underlying mental health comorbidities they have going on? If you look into all the studies into gender dysphoria, real gender dysphoria that started at a young age, 80 to 90% of the time, these kids just grow out of it. And many times these kids grew up to be gay. So this is also harming kids that would grow up to be gay. These little boys who are more effeminate, who are now being taught that they're trans just because they don't conform to stereotypes. Let's leave these kids alone. And if they have some stressors going on in life, we need to be able to help them with that. But trying to change the sex of a child is possibly the most insane thing that mankind has ever done.
Chris Elston, thank you so much for joining me, and stay safe. I do worry about you. You've been assaulted multiple times, like you said, 25 times, and I really do hope that there are some charges at least arising from some of these assaults. Have you had any feedback from Vancouver police yet on why, despite having abundant video footage of these assaults, they've declined to take any action?
I think the last thing they want to do is put a so-called transgender person in handcuffs. They don't need the video evidence. They were all standing right there watching as it occurred, as people were swearing in both of my ears from inches away, hurting my eardrum, crowding into my space after I'd already been assaulted, and they did nothing about it. What if instead of a punch to my throat, that man had had a knife? I'd be dead right now. And the police just watched it all happen. So they're ideologically captured as well. This is the state of Canada today. It's just a total mess.
Chris Elston, stay safe. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rita.